Have you ever noticed how people who consider themselves more conscious, more awakened to the world's problems are often those who suffer most socially? While you question rampant consumerism, your friends continue celebrating every new purchase on Instagram. While you worry about social media manipulation, your family spends hours scrolling infinite feeds without noticing how they're being programmed. There's something deeply disturbing happening. The more awakened you become to society's contradictions, the more socially isolated you feel. And this isn't accidental. It's a phenomenon that's intensifying exponentially, potentially reaching a critical point as early as 2026, when those who insist on remaining conscious may find themselves completely marginalized from the dominant social fabric. This isn't a conspiracy theory or an apocalyptic prediction. It's the observation of a pattern already in motion, accelerated by the same technologies that promised to connect and liberate us. Imagine for a moment the situation of someone who 15 years ago tried to warn about the dangers of social media, algorithmic manipulation, privacy, erosion. These people were seen as paranoid, technophobic, disconnected from reality. Today, their predictions have proven not only correct, but even conservative, given the magnitude of transformation we've witnessed. And yet, paradoxically, it's these same people conscious of the problems who find it hardest to navigate socially in a world that has fully embraced what they warned against. History teaches us that being right about society's problems is rarely a social advantage. Socrates was executed for asking inconvenient questions. Galileo was persecuted for defending truths that contradicted established consensus. More recently, scientists who warned about climate change in the 1970 seconds and 1980 seconds were ridiculed and marginalized, even when their data was incontestable. The pattern is always the same. Society punishes those who question its fundamental illusions, especially when these illusions are necessary to maintain the functioning of the dominant economic and social system. But what makes our current situation particularly unique is the speed and depth with which digital technology is reshaping not just how we relate, but how we define reality itself. We live in an era where algorithms determine what we see, think, and feel, creating customized reality bubbles for each individual. In this context, being awakened doesn't simply mean having access to different information, but possessing the capacity to see the mechanisms by which these realities are constructed and manipulated. It's like being the only sober person at a party where everyone is under the influence of a drug that makes them feel euphoric and connected, while you observe the spectacle with painful clarity. The fundamental problem is that our economy and social structure increasingly depend on the unconscious participation of masses in systems of consumption, attention, and digital validation. Those who refuse to participate, who question these systems, or try to live according to different values, find themselves progressively excluded, not just from economic opportunities, but from basic social connections. It's impossible to maintain deep relationships when you're constantly pointing to the matrix while everyone around you is happy living inside it. This dynamic is intensifying at an alarming rate. Each passing year, more aspects of social life migrate to digital platforms controlled by algorithms. Romantic relationships are mediated by applications that gamify romance. Professional careers depend on digital presence and personal branding. Even basic activities like buying food, socializing, or learning about local events require participation in digital ecosystems that collect data, manipulate behaviors, and reinforce specific consumption patterns. What we observe isn't simply a generational divide or a matter of technological adaptation. It's a fundamental divergence in how different groups of people perceive and navigate reality. On one side, we have those who have fully embraced digital mediation of human experience, finding in it convenience, connection, and meaning. On the other, we have those who maintain a critical perspective on these transformations, but who pay a growing social price for this consciousness. The question becomes even more complex when we consider that many of those who consider themselves awakened may actually be trapped in their own reality bubbles, just different from the dominant ones. The internet is full of communities that see themselves as bearers of special truths, whether about conspiracy, alternative spirituality, radical politics, or unconventional life philosophies. These communities offer a type of refuge for those who feel alienated from mainstream culture, but frequently create their own systems of dogmatic thinking and social isolation. True awakening, perhaps, isn't adhering to any of these specific worldviews, but developing the capacity to consciously navigate between different constructed realities, recognizing both their potential and their limitations. This requires a sophisticated form of emotional and social intelligence that allows a person to maintain their convictions and critical perceptions without completely isolating themselves from the social world around them. But this navigation is becoming increasingly difficult. The algorithms that govern our digital interactions are designed to maximize engagement, and engagement is most easily obtained through polarization and confirmation of pre-existing biases. This means digital platforms have an economic incentive to divide society into increasingly isolated and radicalized tribes. Those who try to maintain a nuanced perspective, who refuse to align completely with any specific tribe, find themselves without place in this ecosystem. The situation is further complicated by the fact that many of the concerns of those who consider themselves awakened are in fact legitimate and urgent. Issues related to digital manipulation, privacy erosion, social media's impact on mental health, growing economic inequalities, environmental and social crises are real problems requiring attention and action. Ignoring these issues may be socially more comfortable, but it's intellectually dishonest and potentially dangerous for humanity's future. So we arrive at our era's central paradox. Those who are capable of seeing and articulating society's most urgent problems are systematically marginalized by the very social structures that would need to be transformed to solve these problems. It's as if we're on a sinking ship, but the only passengers who perceive the danger are prevented from communicating with the crew because their message is considered too disturbing for other passengers' morale. This phenomenon isn't just a sociological curiosity. It has profound implications for humanity's capacity to face the complex challenges ahead. If the most conscious and critical voices are systematically silenced or marginalized, how can we develop effective solutions for problems that require precisely this kind of clear, uncompromised perspective? The date 2026 isn't arbitrary. It's approximately when various technological and social trends will converge to dramatically intensify these dynamics. Artificial intelligence integration into social media will make behavioral manipulation more sophisticated and subtle. Virtual and augmented reality will create additional layers of digital mediation of experience. Social credit systems, already being experimented with in some countries, may expand to include not just financial behavior, but social and ideological conformity. In this context, those who insist on questioning, on maintaining critical perspectives, on living according to values that don't align with the dominant digital system's imperatives, may find themselves not just socially isolated, but actively penalized by algorithms that govern access to jobs, relationships, services, and opportunities. But perhaps the real question isn't how to avoid this marginalization, but how to redefine it as a form of creative resistance. Throughout history, marginalized groups have frequently developed alternative forms of social organization, distinct value systems, and innovative cultural practices that eventually influenced or even transformed dominant culture. Let me pause for a moment to ask, do you also feel this growing tension between your awareness of our world's problems and your need for social belonging? This sensation that the more you see the contradictions around you, the harder it becomes to maintain meaningful relationships with those who prefer not to see? I know it can be isolating to carry these perceptions, especially when they make us question not just the world, but our place in it. If this feeling resonates with you, share your experience in the comments. It can be as simple as writing, "I feel this isolation when." Your honesty might be exactly what someone needs to read today, to realize they're not alone in this seemingly solitary journey of consciousness. The most interesting possibility is that those who are marginalized today for their critical consciousness may be unknowingly developing the skills and perspectives that will be essential for navigating the emerging world. While most people adapt to realities created by algorithms, the awakened are learning to live with less digital mediation, to develop more authentic relationships, to find meaning in sources that don't depend on constant external validation. This could be a disguised evolutionary advantage. In a world where artificial intelligence will assume many basic cognitive functions, the most valuable human skills may be precisely those the awakened are being forced to develop: independent critical thinking, capacity to tolerate ambiguity and uncertainty, resistance to manipulation, ability to form deep human connections without technological mediation. The irony is that those seen today as socially maladjusted may actually be better prepared for the future than those who have adapted perfectly to the present. This isn't necessarily consoling, because the transition will likely be difficult and painful for everyone, but it suggests that the current suffering of the awakened may not be just a useless sacrifice, but part of an adaptation process to conditions that haven't fully arrived yet. What does this mean for those who find themselves in this position? First, it may be necessary to accept that social isolation may be temporary, but also inevitable in certain phases of great historical transformations. Second, it may be useful to focus on building small communities of people who share similar perspectives, creating support networks that don't depend on dominant social structures. Third, it's important to develop practices and skills that offer meaning and purpose independent of external social recognition. Perhaps the most important question isn't how to avoid marginalization, but how to use it creatively. How can outsiders become innovators? How can the perspective of those outside the system offer solutions that those immersed in it cannot see? How can the suffering of consciousness be transformed into fuel for positive change? History suggests that great social transformations frequently begin at the margins, with people who were forced to develop alternative ways of living and thinking. Civil rights movements, scientific revolutions, artistic and philosophical innovations often emerged from groups that were initially excluded or marginalized by dominant society. If this is true, then those who today feel isolated by their critical consciousness may be participating unknowingly in the gestation of future forms of social and individual organization. Their current marginalization may be the price of being a few steps ahead in the evolution of human consciousness. This doesn't make the suffering less real or less difficult. Being right about society's problems doesn't offer immediate comfort when you're struggling to maintain relationships or find your place in the world. But it can offer a larger perspective on the meaning of these difficulties. The final question, perhaps, is how to maintain hope and humanity amid this transition. How to remain open to growth and connection, even when familiar structures of society seem to be dissolving. How to cultivate love and compassion, both for those who sleep and those who have awakened, recognizing that we're all navigating unknown waters. The answer may lie in understanding that truly awakening isn't just about seeing the world's problems, but about developing the wisdom to respond to these problems with creativity, love, and courage. It's not about being right about what's wrong, but about consciously participating in creating something better. If these reflections have touched something you've been feeling, but perhaps haven't been able to fully articulate, know that you're not alone in this seemingly solitary journey. By subscribing to the channel, you'll connect with a community of people who, like you, are consciously navigating the complexities of our time, seeking not just to understand the transformations we're experiencing, but to creatively participate in shaping the emerging future. Each week, we explore together the great questions that define our era, offering not simple answers, but perspectives that can illuminate your own path of discovery and growth. This is an ongoing conversation about how to live with wisdom, authenticity, and purpose in times of radical change. Subscribe so we can continue this essential exploration about what it means to be human in a transforming world and how we can consciously contribute to the emergence of wiser and more compassionate ways of existing together on this planet.
You know, if you think about the evolution of organic beings, so it took billions of years to get from amoebas to dinosaurs. Digital evolution is millions of times faster. And if GPT-4 or ChatGPT, this is the amoeba, so how would the T-Rex look like?
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're right that it won't be what we imagine, that it won't be like in Matrix or Terminator, where artificial intelligence will roam the streets and kill people.
No.
But so what will it look like? I mean, what are the potential dangerous outcome?
It's not like there is one big computer somewhere that is trying to take over the world. AIs, we need to think about them as millions, potentially billions, of new non-human agents that fill more and more positions in more and more systems, bureaucracies, corporations, armies, governments. Again, making decisions about the world and about our life. And we, in the process, not just losing our power, but losing the ability to understand the world. Because increasingly we don't understand how these things make decisions. We don't understand these extremely complex systems. I mean, what we have seen already in recent years is that AIs are taking over to some extent our culture, our society, the conversation. You know, on social media, some of the most important decisions about what kind of content to promote is being taken by algorithms. And the AIs decide to promote hate speech and fake news and conspiracy theory because they were given the task of increasing user engagement. This is like the holy grail of social media companies, is increase user engagement. And the algorithms discovered, by trial and error, by experimenting on millions of people, that outrage gets engagement. And this has already resulted in increased polarization in societies all over the world, from Myanmar to the United States. And again, this is just the beginning, because so far these algorithms were promoting content created by human beings. Somebody needed, a human being had to invent the conspiracy theory that then the algorithm promoted. Now, with the new generation of AIs, they can create the content by themselves.
Well, do you also think, I mean, in Nexus you draw from history to predict or paint a picture of what might happen if we don't regulate AI now or soon. And I mean, you're right about the other technical revolutions, like the printing press and the industrial revolutions. What do you think is the most important lesson that we can learn from history to use today?
I mean, there are two lessons. First of all, that if you create a completely free market of information, truth will not prevail. Truth is more complicated, more costly, more painful than fictions and lies and mythologies. You know, even as a journalist, you want to just invent some fictional story, that's very easy. You want to write the truth, you have to invest a lot of time and energy and effort. Similarly, if you think about the other side of the equation, the audience, for the audience to connect to a truthful story is often more difficult because reality is complex, it's complicated. So it demands a lot of effort to really understand a true story. Whereas a fictional story, you can make it as simple as possible. So if you want the truth to win, you have to tilt the balance, you have to invest something. The other lesson that we learned from previous big technological revolutions is that humans are extremely adaptable, but the process of adaptation is costly and dangerous. When humans began to develop industrial technology, nobody knew how to build a good industrial society. So there were various experiments. Imperialism was a huge experiment in building industrial societies. There were lots of people in the 19th and early 20th century who thought an industrial society, it has to be an empire, because you need to control the source of raw material and you need to control the markets. So we have to build an empire. And this type of thinking, it spread. Britain and France and Japan and Russia and the United States, they all went about building empires. And with terrible consequences for hundreds of millions of people until people realized, no, you can build an industrial society which isn't an empire. And similarly, you had other people who said the only way to build a really efficient industrial society is communism. And you had this huge experiment with communism in the Soviet Union and other places, which again was extremely costly. And the same with fascism. Fascism was also a huge experiment, failed experiment in how to build an industrial society. So you can say, okay, after all these experiments, after imperialism and communism and fascism and the two world wars, we finally got it right. And we can argue about it, but let's say that we got it right. If we have to go again through this process, this time with AI and bioengineering, we don't know how to build these kind of AI-based societies, so we have to go through another cycle of failed experiments, more imperialism and totalitarianism and world war, and in the end, we'll get it right. This is very bad news. So the historical lesson is, don't just think about the end result.
But do you also think that we can learn from literature? I mean, haven't we been warned by Mary Shelley, Philip K. Dick, William Gibson, Isaac Asimov?
We have been warned, and it's very important, it's very good that we have been warned. I think the most important literary genre of our era is science fiction, because it attempts it engages with all these possibilities and attempts to warn us about the dangers and to speculate about how to build better societies. But for this to be successful, I think that science fiction needs to really dig deep into how technology changes in a fundamental way relations between human beings. Because you have a lot of science fiction which is just, like taking a very old story and reenacting it with robots. So you can do like Romeo and Juliet with robots, or in space with laser guns and spaceships, and it is still Romeo and Juliet. I mean, it doesn't tell you anything new about how humans relate to each other.
But you also write that we need more fiction about bureaucracy.
Yeah, this is, I think, the biggest lacuna in art, is that art is not very good in explaining bureaucracy.
We have Kafka.
We have Kafka, we have Catch-22. It's not completely missing. But if you look, say, at the big blockbusters...
It's not the bestsellers, no.
Yes, it's not the bestsellers, it's not the blockbusters. And this is a problem, because our life is managed mainly by bureaucratic systems. But then when we open the television and we watch a TV series about politics, it's likely to ignore the bureaucracy and instead to tell us a medieval or even Stone Age story about dynastic politics. The focus is on a family or a couple of families and the kind of basic biological dramas that characterize competition within or between families. So you have something like Succession, with the kids competing for the attention of the father. This is a very important story, which was crafted by evolution already millions of years before there were humans. This is chimpanzee stuff. They know it also. And it's not a good guide for how politics in the 21st century actually happens. Because if we don't have these kinds of stories, then people don't understand the world. They easily fall victim to conspiracy theories about, the deep state and all these, cabals that control the world. But in fact, it's bureaucracy, it's not conspiracy. And it also makes it more difficult for us to change the system. You feel helpless. Evolution kind of prepared us for death by a tiger, not for death by a document.
No.
And today, a lot more people are dying because of documents than because of tigers.
Yeah. So, are you positive, are you optimistic, or are you pessimistic for our future? I know it's a hard question.
I try to be a realist. I mean, basically optimism is like saying, oh, everything will be okay. and pessimism, no, we are all doomed. Both these positions, they make us abdicate responsibility. Because if in the end everything will be okay, why bother? You don't need to take action. And it's the same if we are doomed, so why waste whatever little time we have on taking action? Realism is understanding that we have, as human beings, as a human species, we still have the resources, the technology, the wisdom to deal with major challenges, whether it's climate change or whether it's the rise of AI. Again, for instance, when I think about climate change, one of the things that people should realize is what is the cost of preventing catastrophic climate change? What is what size of a check do you need to write if you want to solve this? How much money? And nobody knows for sure, but the best estimates we have, something like 2%, 3%, maybe 5% of global GDP. Now, this is a lot, but it's completely doable. If I told you it's 50%, then forget it. We are not going to do it. It's not like if you're a dinosaur 65 million years ago, when the asteroid comes, then don't bother. I mean, there is nothing you can do about it. But we are not like the dinosaurs. To shift even 5% of our resources from one aim, one field to another, this is what politicians do all the time.
Well, Professor Harari, it was a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I could get an AI to tell me that it feels pain and sadness.
That's a big problem because there is a huge incentive to train AIs to pretend to be alive. In truth, because we don't understand consciousness, we don't have any proof, even that other humans have feelings. I feel my own feelings, but I never feel your feelings. I only assume that you're also a conscious being. Society grants a status of a conscious entity to not only to humans, but also to some animals, not based on any scientific proof, but based on social convention. Like most people feel that their dogs are conscious, so society accepts, most societies, that dogs are sentient beings and they have some rights. Even if AI has no feelings, no consciousness, no sentience whatsoever, but it becomes very good at pretending to have feelings. This will become a social convention. People will feel that their AI friend is a conscious being and therefore should be granted rights. This extremely cynical view of humans is not true. Yes, humans are interested in power to some extent in some situations, but this is not the only thing that we want. We are not power-crazy demons. If you look at yourself, start with yourself. Mm-hmm. If I look at myself, do I want power in life? Yes, in some situations I want. This is not the only thing. I really want to know the truth about myself, my life, the world. And the key reason for that is that if you don't know the truth about yourself, you can never be happy. Because you don't know what are the sources of misery in your life, and you can't solve them.